on this edition of The Fifth Estate.
Nothing is in the budget that I thought. Nothing.
I need $30,000 to rent a house, which I don't have.
Families struggling to keep up with skyrocketing rents.
We were just seeing nothing that was even remotely affordable. It was almost like getting punched in the gut.
Forced to compete for fewer and fewer affordable homes.
We're going to see more and more Canadians priced out of living in their communities. I worry.
Say rent hike! We say rent strike!
We trace the roots of this crisis.
These firms are making such extravagant profits. The idea that they need to raise rents, it's kind of insulting, actually.
And find that many renters are left with a sense that no one is looking out for them.
Nobody's talking about the renters. Nobody. And we're just as equally important as somebody who owns a home. Move. That's what we were told. You can move.
I'm Shayna Luck in Halifax. Even in a cold Canadian winter, housing is a hot topic. And the focus is almost always on soaring house prices, making it harder to buy. But in fact, 1 in 3 Canadian households is renting, and discovering that even with an income, finding somewhere, anywhere to live is getting tougher. How did Canada fall into a rental crisis? And how are we going to get out? This is The Fifth Estate.
Brantford, Ontario. More than an hour west of Toronto. A bedroom community where the claim to fame is raising great hockey players. It's also, in Melanie Crawford's mind, a great place to raise a family.
You know, when we first moved in, everything was change tables and infant toys, swings, baby seats, bouncy seats. Did you make your wish?
Yep.
Good girl. Every stage of growing up has happened here.
See?
You've been letting that hang on for so long. You're awesome.
Melanie always planned to be a lifer in Brantford.
We moved in here in 2010. 8 days before we had a baby, and we've been here ever since, so 11 years last September. With the kids at the age they are now, they've been making friends and having the same friends for all these years. I mean, 11 years is their lifetime, and for us it has been too, so we've planted deep, deep roots here in this specific neighborhood and watched it grow too. It's home for us.
Melanie's family has rented this house for so long, it was a shock when her landlord called to say the family of 5 had to leave.
All right, guys, you can come eat. Snack is ready. He said, well, I need to move in and renovate it to sell it. So I had 4 months notice to change my life of 11 years. So here you go.
The worst part was explaining it to her children.
I was devastated. We all cried. Literally, we cried. It is the not having options and not having anything that we've built matter at this stage of the game. You know, because that's too bad for us. We're out.
Halifax, Nova Scotia. A university town. A walkable city. Where Mark Drennan is a student. He's ready to launch his career.
I am a Master of Architecture student at Dalhousie University. I've accepted an internship in Yellowknife with a local architecture firm up there.
He's 33. He needs a home during his internship. And another when he comes back to Halifax.
It makes me nervous. The more luxury condos go up, the more they pull up the market. I am worried that even getting an education and getting a good paying job and you're doing everything that you're told to do, it may not be enough soon.
Mark knows he'll be putting at least half his income towards rent, but he's used to that.
I know some of my classmates, they were living in inns, 2 couples to an apartment because of the prices going up. And in that case, if it's a 1-bedroom, that living room area becomes curtained off and becomes the 2nd bedroom.
He worries about the future.
If it keeps accelerating, I might have to spend the rest of my life, with roommates.
Hamilton, Ontario, a city that rose on industry. But now rents are rising too.
When I moved in here, it was $7.15 a month, all inclusive.
Kevin OToole feels he needs to hold on to what he has.
I've lived here since 2010. My wife took sick, we moved near my in-laws, and then when she passed, I moved here. I found Hamilton still a steel city. To me, it's still a down-to-earth, blue-collar place. This floor that I live on, I can leave the door open and nobody's ever come in. If there's a parcel left there and I'm not home, my neighbor will pick it up and leave me a note that he's got it. They all know the dog. I love living in this building. I love this community. And at 72, where am I going to go?
They're in different cities, in different phases of their lives, but all afraid Canada's rental crisis will leave them stranded. And they're not wrong. Between 2014 and 2019, rents went up by an average of 20% in Canada, while incomes remained largely the same.
The crisis of affordable housing is hitting tenants. Calls are mounting on different levels of government to give tenants a break.
The crisis is so dire, people line up 20 at a time to view basement apartments. Some compare trying to find an apartment to the Hunger Games. In 8 cities, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says a 2-bedroom is beyond the reach of an average person, even if they work full-time.
Experts routinely describe it as a rental housing crisis.
The headlines are hitting home for Melanie in Brantford.
I absolutely want to stay in this neighborhood. I did not get a constant upbringing. I lived 22 places in the first 18 years of my life. So I didn't get what my kids have. And so it's super, super important to me that I get to provide it for them. So it's a hit. And the desire to stay out here is huge for me. This is a new one. I don't think I've seen that one yet.
Melanie is about to discover what she's up against.
This house looks similar even to the one I have and is double in price.
Not only is buying a house getting further out of reach, renting is too.
Nothing is in the budget that I thought. Nothing. I pay $1,450 a month for this 4-bedroom house, and I couldn't get a 2-bedroom for that amount of money right now. I couldn't. So I have to pay double regardless. Twice what I'm paying right now. And I make the same money, right? I don't know about math, but it spells impossible. It feels like we're being led to slaughter. It's so corrupt that we are being charged that. It's the same space, the same amount of space, the same walls, the same everything. But because people don't have a choice but to rent because they can't get a house or they can't qualify for a mortgage, they're just robbing us.
With this strategy, the federal government is not only back in housing, but we're here to stay for the long term.
Even 5 years ago, the problem was building. The federal government pledged to make sure people could afford a roof over their heads.
Our government recognizes that housing rights are human rights. Everyone deserves a safe and affordable place to call home, and we will introduce legislation to ensure.
But advocates say years of ignoring housing is coming home to roost.
The fact of the matter is, over many decades, the federal government was absent on the housing file. So
Douglas Kwan has worked on behalf of tenants for 18 years, and he's seeing the affordable housing problem get worse.
It's not funded as well as it should, but government has a significant role to play in creating affordable housing. They can target what's needed in the communities, whereas the private market will focus on what the market needs.
Renters make up 4.4 million households, or 30% of the population. And because they're outnumbered by homeowners, the policies that benefit them tend to be fewer and less powerful. But how did it all start? Homeownership is an idea that was quite literally sold to Canadians, starting in the 1940s.
Found a realization for their dreams.
There was a lot of marketing in the 40s and 50s around what homeownership was. It's branded as being more patriotic and, homeowners are more responsible. They have all these kind of positive attributes because they're homeowners. Well, that was all marketing to get people to buy houses, but we still actually believe that.
Ren Thomas has studied how the federal government created fiscal policies that made it easy to borrow, easy to buy.
In terms of our cities, a lot of people actually couldn't afford housing until really the 1940s, when we actually enabled long-term mortgages, low-interest mortgages. There was also a major economic emphasis to this type of work because, of course, building new housing would create a lot of jobs for people. It would, really jumpstart the economy, both the construction part and the purchasing of housing.
Our national obsession with real estate has only grown since the 1940s. And the focus on buying has drowned out the interests of people who are renting.
When I have to tell my kids that we are being evicted, despite being good people, good tenants, it really hurts.
Something that governments maybe don't think about, or maybe generally in the Canadian population that we don't think about, is that there's probably always going to be a percentage of the population that homeownership doesn't really work for that group.
The reality is there aren't enough homes to go around. Not enough new homes are being built, and that's a key factor driving up prices. But what's also true is that Canada is losing housing that once counted as affordable, and it's happening at a startling rate. We found one study that shows Canada lost more than 300,000 affordable units between 2011 and 2016. That's like losing every household in Hamilton.
Not only are we not building new rental housing, but we're losing the stock that we have now. There's very little in place to protect existing rental housing from either being converted or demolished.
And I just want to dig into that. When we say losing, it's not necessarily like they vanish into smoke. They're still there, but in a different form. Is that right?
Well, they're often being demolished, so then those units are just lost. The other thing is we're in terms of like losing them to conversion in the sense that, yeah, the units still exist, but they've now been converted to ownership units for a higher income bracket.
Since there aren't enough new affordable units being built, once one of them has its rent increased, it leaves fewer low-cost options for those that need them. Kevin OToole has lived in the same building for more than a decade, and he only pays $110 more per month. But that's nothing compared to his neighbors who just moved in.
The guy next door, it's a new place. He pays $1,800 a month plus hydro. He's paying $1,000 more rent than me for the same thing.
Kevin believes his landlord would be happy to see him move out, so a higher-paying tenant could move in.
If I said to them tomorrow I'm moving out, there'd be a dance over at 40 at the office.
It's happening across Canada. Units like this one in Kevin's complex are getting out of reach. Many places in the country have the same rules.
If you're a sitting tenant, then the rental rates only go up by inflation. That's great, that's manageable. However, once that unit becomes vacant, then it's open to the market and a landlord can set whatever price that they want to set for that unit. There is a tremendous incentive to remove that sitting tenant.
So once the old tenant leaves and before a new tenant comes in, it's perfectly legal to raise the rent 100%.
Absolutely, absolutely.
At 72, Kevin still works part-time at McDonald's.
Oh, what have I got? Uh-oh.
He likes to keep busy, but it's really about making sure he doesn't fall behind on the rent.
I don't want something for nothing. But if I stop work tomorrow, all I have is my pension. Who can afford $1,600, $1,700 a month? To find An affordable apartment, I'd have to go way to hell up to Sudbury or somewhere. Because in Hamilton itself, worse, not as bad as Toronto yet, but to find affordable housing here, minimum for what I want would be minimum, 1 bedroom is $1,500 a month, plus. To find an affordable apartment, no, I couldn't do it. And I don't think I'm the only one.
When we come back, the clock is ticking for Melanie's family to find a new house.
There's no high schools and public schools and whatnot in the area. We're kind of on the edge of the industrial end of town, but I honestly don't even know where the kids would go to school out here.
This is the stuff that nobody sees.
After looking at half a dozen rental properties, Melanie thought she had a lock on the perfect house, but something's gone wrong.
So today's email said that our family's great and they wish us luck, but somebody else offered a year's worth of rent up front and we can't compete with that. So I need $30,000 to rent a house, which I don't have.
Competition for housing is spreading. It's no longer just a big city problem.
So 3 bedrooms. Oh, well, it looks like it's been nicely redone. It's nice hardwood floors.
Melanie has been out of the game for a decade. She's finding out the rules have changed.
Previously, I just thought, oh, it's just a matter of figuring out the system or understanding the new dynamics or, you know, understanding the route, like do I use a real estate agent or, you know, and then when I you know, felt that I finally met an actual landlord, got to speak to them, but got to advocate my own family on my own terms and felt so good, right? Got accepted. And then to have that happen and think like, I can't compete with that. So that broke me.
Melanie is working from home. She's brought one of her old side gigs back to life, selling handmade candies and treats.
I cannot afford it without making an extra $400 to $500 a week. I have to do that. Since I found out we were being evicted, I have hustled in every which way to, you know, money saved is money earned, right? So paid off my credit cards, upped our line of credit. Do you think you'd like to go with me? Sure. All right, get your stuff on.
There's a little over a month left before she has to move. Time is running out.
We're gonna go see a house. Ooh. And then we're gonna go shop.
Yeah.
If we can't find a house around here, then we find a house somewhere else in Brantford and we build new routes. I believe it's out there. This place is a relatively new build. It's $2,550 a month, 3 bedrooms, 3 baths, but an unfinished basement. It's not ideal, and this is the kind of thing we're doing. We're sacrificing, right? Far from our old neighborhood, right? There's no high schools and public schools and whatnot in the area. We're kind of on the edge of the industrial end of town, but I honestly don't even know where the kids would go to school out here. And that's just one of those things we have to face in this situation. It's a luxury I don't get to have at this point, right? I feel the price of the house is ridiculous. Not that I have an option. Oddly enough, I have been submerged in this twilight zone long enough that there's a part of me that's like, only $25.50, right? But then I'm like, wow, it's almost like I just got excited for getting hit in the face with a shovel. Like, it's weird how your perspective changes.
Canadians all over the country are feeling the same pressure over housing, including here in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. I'm on my way to visit a family who has to leave their home of 10 years. It's the house with the sold sign.
We received the letter saying the place was sold.
It was almost like getting punched in the gut. You knew it was coming, but you couldn't react. And then you're like, well, gosh, what are we going to do now?
John and Stacy Smith's kids are teenagers. The family is searching for a house with 3 bedrooms.
We were just seeing nothing that was even remotely affordable.
I've reached out to numerous apartment buildings. There just doesn't seem to be much out there for families. 2 bedrooms cannot accommodate, a family of 4. So if you're a family, you are really going to struggle finding a place to live.
In Halifax, rents have gone up by close to 20% since 2015. The Smiths' neighborhood hasn't changed much, but house rentals have doubled.
I mean, I saw places that were $3,000.
He's a delivery driver. She works in retail, but her job's ending soon.
It's definitely going to be a struggle.
Even with a small rent supplement from the province, things will be tight.
I have a lot of skills that I can put towards a new job. It's just putting myself back out there after 20 years to look for another job. It is quite a bit of stress. I think there will be a lot of corners cut, a lot of things that we will have to cut back on in order to make rent every month.
It's incredibly disheartening to see that people just can't afford to live where they've lived for years. A place to live dictates where your kids go to school. It dictates what address you put on your resume, where you go to work. It's a social determinant of health. It's the start of everything else.
The Smith family will join more than 3 million Canadian households, paying more than 1/3 of their income to put a roof over their head. That's the level where the federal government officially declares a family's home unaffordable.
We shouldn't really have anyone that's paying more than 30% of their income towards housing. It sort of indicates a flaw in the system that we're not meeting the needs of those individuals.
There is more to the rental story. It's not just prices that are changing, landlords are too. 1 in 5 people buying a house now is doing it to rent it out as an investment property. And large corporations with shareholders have moved into the apartment market.
In Canada, the shift towards this growth of very large corporate landlords that treat housing as investment products has involved the evolution of smaller real estate companies into these big firms that are growing in terms of sophistication and growing in terms of size, and then also growing in terms of their stock.
Those who study housing call this financialization. August's research includes real estate investment trusts, known as REITs, large companies that own real estate to produce income for their shareholders.
REITs alone have gone from owning 0 units in 1996 to almost 200,000 last year. So that's a dramatic increase in consolidation of ownership. If we look at other types of financial firms, including asset managers and institutional investors and publicly listed companies, collectively they hold about 20 or 30% of all purpose-built multifamily buildings in Canada. So that's a pretty big amount.
This means more and more homes are being treated as a commodity rather than a place to live.
We're seeing this kind of single-minded orientation towards trying to extract as much value as possible out of those buildings. The important thing to realize is that those buildings are people's homes, and where that money comes from is basically tenants' pockets.
Kevin OToole knows this all too well. His building was bought by a REIT in 2015.
Here it is. When they took over, one of the biggest things we had was fear of who were they, what were they doing?
He's kept records of the ways he says the new management tried to oust longtime tenants to make way for people who could pay more.
They wanted the legacy tenants out. It was simple as that, and they said it. Move. That's what we were told. You can move. Where's the original one?
The company increased fees for everything from parking to laundry. And it offered bonuses to tenants to get them to leave.
There it was there. They don't care if I move out of here, if the guy next door moves out. They don't care. They will just bump up the rent.
Institutional landlords don't buy just any buildings. They target older ones with low rents. And there are many to choose from. Most of Canada's rental apartments were built before the 1980s, and they're aging.
These buildings have, over the years, evolved often into sort of de facto affordable housing. You see people on fixed incomes, often newcomer families, lower income families living in a lot of these buildings. And so financial firms have targeted these types of buildings and are raising the rents essentially in these properties. So you have higher proportions of racialized people among renter populations, higher proportion of single-parent families, Indigenous households, low-income households, and people living on fixed incomes. So really, we're looking at a lower income and marginalized population that is being targeted for this particular profit-making business strategy.
We have rent control, so as long as you stay put, you're protected. If you are new to this market, then you will pay a market rate. But
Michael Brooks is the CEO of RealPAC, an association that represents the largest institutional landlords in Canada.
Everybody in the private sector is self-interested in maintaining and growing their income. And they all want to be seen as contributing to the solution and not being part of the problem. However, they've got their own obligations. They've got their own investors or pensioners to fund. They've got to manage costs. Deeply affordable housing is a public good. The private sector is not primarily in the business of providing a public good.
In Halifax, university student Mark Drennan has been apartment hunting for his internship in Yellowknife for more than a month.
So with the Yellowknife accommodations, it's around the $900, $1,000 for a roommate. Everyone says how it's expensive to live up in the territories. So I figured it would be a bit more expensive, and the housing, the rental costs up there reflected that. I said, okay, it's about $300-400 more a month for an equivalent unit in Halifax.
Canada's north has one of the highest costs of living in the country. Most apartments in Yellowknife are owned by institutional landlords.
Initially, it was trying to figure out what the market was like there. There's only those few companies. It's been a long process.
One property company called Northview owns more than half of the apartment stock in the city.
If you are interested in leasing one of our apartment houses,
So if you, for some reason, that company doesn't accept an application, there's only a few other companies up there, and their rents are about $8,000, $9,000, $1,000 more for an equivalent unit. You know, I'm not a doctor or a lawyer or something that makes that kind of money.
When we return, tenants fight back.
What would be your answer to those folks who are saying, I just can't afford this?
I feel for them. What I'd say to you is, you can't expect the private sector to solve all social ills.
No eviction! No eviction! Tenants United!
Renters outraged by the housing crisis have been taking to the streets.
We say rent strike! They say rent hike! We say rent strike!
Back in 2018, Kevin OToole and his neighbors were gearing up for a fight.
Stony Creek tenants are doing something!
We went on strike. We went on rent strike.
They say rent hike! We say rent strike!
Kevin's landlord, a large company called Interrent, applied to increase rents by close to 10% over 2 years for renovations to the building.
We fought them tooth and nail about what the capital expenditures were. A lot of the stuff they did to us that they fixed was cosmetic. Did they have to put in those new structures in the front? Again, cosmetic. Did they have to put in new railings? Again, cosmetic. And in here, they're stating about the landscaping. Did they have to plant all these trees, which if you look now are still crap? Like, it's cosmetic. So yeah, cosmetic doesn't help us.
scale.
Michael Brooks is the CEO of the industry group RealPAC. He argues these rent hikes are standard practice.
Those above guideline increases are critical to be able to enable the landlord to be able to get a return on that extra cost that the landlords had to spend to upgrade the building. I mean, this is like an old house. It's the same analogy. At some point in time, you need to do a lot of upgrades to modernize that house. That's really expensive.
No one would want to see housing deteriorate. But are you saying that the only way to keep these buildings in good repair also makes them more expensive for the lowest income people?
Absolutely. That is the problem. There's got to be a middle ground somewhere. We're all trying to figure out what are the tools that gets us in that middle ground.
So there was the old balconies.
Kevin acknowledges the building needed some repairs, but he says the company knew what it was getting into when it bought a 44-year-old building.
There's certain things, any building, if you're a homeowner, you have to fix this. And this is what some of the other people say, well, if you're a homeowner, you have to pay all these things. But you own a home. I don't. So, don't pass it on to me.
Despite Kevin and his neighbors' efforts, their rent still went up by 4.4%. In case after case, our research showed fighting it almost never works. In Toronto alone, the majority of applications go the landlord's way. And the Fifth Estate found that InterRent tells its shareholders the tactics it uses to grow rent. That includes apartment suite turnovers and the rent hikes called AGIs, meant to cover the cost of renovations.
Repairs and renovations actually make money for firms, and they invest in them because they can extract higher rents afterwards, whether it's by applying for an above guideline increase or whether it's by charging more to a tenant that then moves into a renovated unit that's marketed as a luxury unit.
In the last decade, InterRent's apartment holdings have tripled, while the money coming in from these properties has increased 5 times. It's only one of many such companies making significant profits. Between 2015 and 2020, the top 4 REITs have paid out more than $2 billion in profits to their investors.
These firms are making such extravagant profits, the idea that they need to raise rents in order to do basic maintenance that is their actual responsibility as a business. To me, it's kind of insulting, actually.
We reached out to InterRent, but they didn't respond to our requests for comment. The company is a member of RealPAC, Michael Brooks' association. So are 124 other big real estate owners and developers.
Your members pay out tens of millions of dollars in profits to their investors every year. How does that square with the idea that they can't afford renovations?
The top 21 owners of apartments in Canada are fund managers for pension funds, REITs, a few private companies. When you say millions in profits, it flows right through to the end unit holder.
The end unit holder he refers to are pensioners like Kevin, because many pension funds invest in institutional landlords. Though in fact, anyone can own shares in these companies.
Do we have to say that it's either tenants or pensioners? Is there not a middle ground here?
Good question. I think there's a role for everybody in solving the rental affordability issue. Without landlords who have access to capital and scale and good management, without that, you're not going to meet the housing needs of this country going forward. This rich owner narrative, to me, I don't buy it. I think it's an attempt to demonize some of the larger landlords. Don't buy it.
What would be your answer to those folks who are saying, I just can't afford this?
I feel for them. It's a problem we all have to address. I don't know whether you're putting that problem on our industry's shoulders or not. Again, what I'd say to you is, You can't expect the private sector to solve all social ills.
When we come back, the federal government acknowledges the problem.
We need to build more affordable housing in Canada, and that's exactly what we're doing, including...
But is it enough?
All they're saying is first-time homeowners. Nobody's talking about the renters. Nobody.
In Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, the Smith family finally knows where their next home will be.
She got on the phone and she's like, oh my God, what? I'm like, see, we got the house. And I had to go away and cry a little bit. I'm not afraid to admit it. I mean, I was happy, ecstatic, and it was like it was a part of a burden that was gone.
Let's put all this inside.
Some of their burdens are still there. Stacy has taken a new job in a clothing store to help cover the extra $1,000 a month they're going to need for rent.
We didn't have Christmas because we knew we needed half of the month's rent to hold the place if we were going to get it. And if we didn't have the damage deposit, they would have took the next people if there was anyone else behind us. Christmas Eve, I was able to run out and get the kids a couple of things so that there would be something under the tree for them. It was not our typical Christmas at all. They did without quite a bit this year.
So, Stace, what do we have left? It's just a little stuff that will take 2 or 3.
They've gone through the grind of finding a new home and all the extra costs it will bring. The move has left the Smiths feeling completely drained.
Been here 10 years, know all the neighbors, super friendly. You know, it's a new chapter. And you don't always want to start that next chapter. It's not always better, you know, so. Yeah, I'll miss the area for sure. I mean, we're close, but just this was home.
10 years is plenty of time to make a home. And it's exactly how long the federal government gave itself for the plan to make housing more affordable for all Canadians.
Years of hard work have culminated in the National Housing Strategy.
Remember that announcement back in 2017?
Changing plan to help Canadians get into homes and stay there.
We're halfway through the 10-year strategy. Are we halfway to the goals?
No. I think there was a lot of hope with the new national housing strategy that the federal government was, beginning to engage back in housing in a meaningful way. But I think that this is sort of typical of a lot of federal government programs where it's a national program. There's national guidelines on things that sometimes don't work in the provincial, context.
For weeks, we've been asking for an interview, but the federal housing minister didn't have time to sit down with us. Though in February, he did speak to a committee of MPs about the severe lack of affordable housing for families.
A lot of work has been done, but more work needs to be done, and we need to build more affordable housing in Canada, and that's exactly what we're doing, including the recently announced results of the Rapid Housing Initiative. 10,250 permanent new affordable housing units through the Rapid Housing Initiative.
We asked Minister Hussein, how is that enough when Canada is losing hundreds of thousands of affordable units? His office wrote back that a single affordable housing project can take up to 3 years to complete, and that the National Housing Strategy initiatives are taking steps to fill important supply gaps in the Canadian housing landscape. But we know there is more to do. The minister didn't answer our questions about how many affordable units have been built under the National Housing Strategy, or what the rent in those units is. Kevin OToole has no confidence that help is coming.
All they're saying is first-time homeowners. Nobody's talking about the renters. Nobody. And we're just as equally important as somebody who owns a home. I don't want something for nothing. I wasn't brought up that way. And most of my friends aren't either. But damn, let me live.
His landlord is applying for another rent hike to cover the cost of more renovations.
I'm not moving out of here. I will fight them tooth and nail. If I have to go by myself, I am not letting them get away with it.
Mark's move to Yellowknife is approaching.
I did not get a reply for a few weeks. And so I kind of poked at them Like, I'm still here. Any of these buildings is fine.
The property company, Northview, finally accepted Mark's application and is now his new landlord.
It's been a long process. It's been a little over a month, I think, but I was able to sign a lease. It's a relief to know that I'm not going to be broke or starving. I have a place up there for the 8 months, just so long as I have a roof over my head and I can eat. That's my priority, and it really shouldn't be a high priority for anybody, but it is these days. Just having the bare basics.
He has a place for now, but he's not sure he'll ever progress to something else.
Obviously, I would love to buy a place to live, but the longer you save for a home, the more out of reach the home becomes.
We're going to see the next couple of years more and more Canadians priced out of living in their communities. Large families that should be living in a 2 or 3 bedroom home, only able to live in bachelor apartments. It is a serious crisis that we're facing.
Back in Brantford, Melanie Crawford's family has a new home too.
We got the call, and it's happening. We did it. We did it. We did it. We're paying $1,100 more a month for significantly less space, and we've had to literally either throw out, sell, or donate, almost 30% of what we've built in the last 12 years.
The family has pared down a lot. They're concentrating on the good stuff.
It was really important to me that we focused on building a home with what we could take. And that's how we started this process. Everybody just started gathering the things that they loved the most and that were most important to them.
But along the way, they've learned some hard truths about what it means to be a renter in Canada.
There are no incentives, there are blocks, and they're just getting worse. If you're somebody that's renting and you are facing what I'm facing right now and you do not have the advantages that I have right now, then you're going to be homeless.